Okay. Hello everyone. This is Violet Winters. Winters Smith now. I've decided to append my family name to my chosen name. And it's been 2 years, more or less, since I've posted on this podcast, but I'm trying to start it up again. For those of you listening on Rob Phoenix's channel, this is a podcast I host called Jerry's Kids about growing up in the Falwell Empire in Lynchburg, Virginia, in his church, and how that impacted me as a child, and also the ramifications of that in my adulthood, especially as a queer and trans person. Um, Today, I'm here with Rob Phoenix, who, well, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay. Hello, everybody who might be listening or watching. I'm Rob Phoenix. I live in South Central Pennsylvania, and I am a gay man who grew up in the Christian church, left for a while, came back, and so we're just going to talk a little bit about that journey. So thanks again for having me on your show and for being on my show simultaneously.
Yeah, absolutely. And um, yeah, we'll be focusing on the interaction between Christianity and folk magical traditions. In this case, specifically, Brokerai or powwow, or I believe it's also called, what's the other name for it?
Hacks and
Or are
mice.
the, yes. Um, which is very new to me and I have recently discovered and I'm quite excited about, because it is and correct me if anything I'm saying is wrong, but a Pennsylvania German or Pennsylvania Dutch
Mhm.
tradition, which is a strong part of my family line. Um, my mother is from the Lancaster County area, and my family has um, lived in that area of Pennsylvania for 2 or 3 centuries, and most of them either are or were Amish or Mennonite, um, and came from the Bern area of Switzerland to inhabit Pennsylvania as settler colonists, which is another issue and a topic for another day and perhaps another podcast that also trying to untangle all of the complications of that and implications of that. But um, yeah, very excited to discover a folk magical tradition within my own ancestry.
Yeah.
Um, that's what I've been looking for, I think, for quite some time.
Well, I'm glad to talk about it. Yeah. So I guess I forgot to say that when I introduced myself, but I am a practitioner of Pennsylvania German Brauerei. I have been for since the 1990s. Um, and so, yeah, it's pretty much my life's work. So that's probably should have started with that, but
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, how I guess can you talk a bit about how you grew up? Like, did you grow up in the church?
Mhm. Okay. So my parents divorced when I was very young. Mother and her side of the family were Catholics. And so she would make us go to church. And, me and my brother, my sister, we didn't want to because it was boring. We didn't care for it. But we went through all the Catholic sacraments. Um, but on the flip side of that, we were raised largely by my grandparents, my father's parents, and they were German Reformed. And they did not have a favorable opinion of Catholicism. Um, it's my understanding that that was just kind of the norm. They both of my grandparents and their parents were from Austria. So they were very German reformed. They did not have favorable views of Catholicism just because that's why they left Austria, because the Catholics were oppressing everybody. Um, so living, learning their beliefs were so different than what my mother believed. When my mother believed in, there were statues of saints around the house and she would say prayers to them. And the novena candles and such. And my grandparents didn't have any of that. And they didn't believe in having any of that. There were no crucifixes in their home. It was very simplistic. And it was like the opposite at my mom's house. So that was that. So we grew up with that. And I remember even at an early age, I didn't really understand what church was all about, but you know, I would pray and pray about certain things because I was being made fun of in school a lot, being picked on because I was the quiet, sensitive kid. And um I just felt like I was very alone, so I started praying to Jesus and I felt like nothing was changing. And I remember my mother said, "Well, don't pray to Jesus, pray to Mary because Jesus is very busy." And so that got me praying to Mary, which my grandparents did not care for that at all. My grandfather thought that was, rubbish. That's what he would say. Um,
Yeah, my mom would have said that was like, I don't know if she would have called it demonic, but certainly not Christian.
right, right, right.
We called it idols. We referred to the saints and Mary as idols.
Yeah, so you can imagine it was just, I knew my grandparents didn't really like my mother, but and they were glad my dad divorced her. It was just kind of a weird situation. But um but this kind of helped me because I was just as I grew into my teenage years, I started dabbling in like the Anna Riva books of spells, and me and my friends would be up in the woods in our treehouse, doing with these witchcraft books, doing spells because everybody hated us, in school. They were beating us up, and I didn't have any physical strength or knowledge to get away. So let's do witchcraft. And, you do what you do. But
Yeah, I can resonate
yeah,
with
so
that. Like, yeah.
all that really kind of prepared me. So when I got in my late teens, into my early 20s, I just really didn't want to go to church because I felt like it wasn't helping. But praying to Mary had accustomed me, I guess, to praying to a mother figure. And so when this idea of Wicca and witchcraft were introduced to me as a religion, I thought, well, I need religion. I need something structured in my life. I just was that kind of person. And they were saying, well, when you were praying to Mary, you weren't really praying to Mary, you were praying to the mother goddess. And, I was just very gullible. I was an anxious person, I had a lot of anxiety, and so I just fell into it. And I mean, it was actually fun, my years, like learning witchcraft. I was in an actual, like, I guess, proper witchcraft tradition run by
Mhm.
somebody local. Her name is Silver Ravenwolf. And so her coven is all in this area. And
It's a Wiccan coven. Or
yes, Wiccan-ish.
okay, okay.
Um,
But like Gardnerian type or okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know that I would say all that, but it was fun. It
Uh-huh. Sure, sure.
felt empowered and like I felt like I had power. And one of the cool things they were learning about was Pennsylvania German powwow. And so now we're in like the mid 90s, early to mid 90s, and powwow is just this Pennsylvania homespun tradition. And I really like the sound of it. But what I was learning about, because I had heard of powwow growing up, but people just thought, whatever, there's a powwow. It's not a big deal. And, but all of a sudden they're teaching it like all these things about it. And I thought, I didn't realize it was all this, but you get what you get when you join a group like that, like a neo-pagan group like that. And it's kind of an eclectic mess. And there was a lot of like historical revisionism. And so the powwow that I learned through them was not the actual powwow. Um, so by the late 90s, I was really learning more and more about powwowing, and I really liked the actual like truth of it, that how ingrained in the culture of Pennsylvania it is, how Christian it is. And it kind of like solved two of my problems at once. I really wanted to learn magic and work magic, but I really needed to connect with like an actual God that didn't feel like a make-believe goddess. I don't know. I can't remember how I felt all those years ago, but I just kind of I know that was my process. Um, but I struggled with that too because being gay, I thought, well, what do I have to compromise in order for God to like accept me and like
Yeah.
help me be a powwow? And that took a long time. I was kind of going back and forth. I went through this like ultra religious phase, ultra radical Christian phase for about 2 years. And I was so annoying to everybody around me. I was even annoying to myself. And I was trying to deny that, like, I wanted to be single. I didn't want any gay friends. I wanted to just be
Yeah.
what the church wanted me to be. And by then I was back to attending a German Reformed church.
German Reformed. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And which by that time became known here as the United Church of Christ. They like blended with
Yeah.
the Lutherans. It became the Union Church, and then it became
Okay.
Church of Christ, church politics, whatever. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I was trying too hard to fit in, and I was just like totally denying who I was. So every day was just like nonstop stress. And then finally, I over course corrected. I left church. I stopped thinking about,
Hmm.
you know, I just,
Yeah. Yeah. Been there.
yeah. So I finally got to a place where I'm like, you know what? Screw church. Screw what the people wrote about it. Screw what the
Yeah.
rules are, because that has nothing to do with anything. It's all just
Yeah.
men BS. So I started looking at Christ as the man, because
Hmm.
I have no problem believing that a man named Jesus walked the earth, or Yeshua, whatever his name would have been pronounced. I have no problem believing that. I have no problem believing he was a prophet, and I have no problem believing he was a local folk magician and connected to God. Maybe he was the son of God, or maybe he just had a really great spiritual connection to God. But ultimately, I realized it didn't matter. This was the way I could relate to Christ on a level that makes sense to me without changing who I am, because I see Christ as the guy walking through the wilderness, walking,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And just surrounded by people, and they're all walking barefoot and sitting down on the ground to eat their lunch. And they're just talking while sitting on rocks under the open sky. And it has nothing to do with golden candelabras and rituals and silliness. So
Yeah.
I
Sounds
really,
chill.
yeah, I just gained such an appreciation for Christ as magician. And I took a lot of inspiration from the oldest images of Christ, to show him like number one as a youth, like a beardless youth, but number two, using the magic wand. So I don't know, I just really found a way that in Christ, the man, Jesus, accepted everybody, and never once did he say anything like gay people are bad. So, and never once did he say marriage is between a man and a woman. Um, So it felt like I was coming back to a place where I needed to be spiritually. I felt like embraced in a way that I never felt in my life. And it gave me that sort of father figure that I needed. And Pennsylvania German Powwow gave me the structure that I also needed, because everything about the tradition is written down. We literally have everything. There's no reason for us to make anything up, interject anything into history where it never belonged. The entire tradition is recorded. It's saved in our cultural centers, and it's published in books. So it's already there waiting for us to just like respark people's interest in it. So anyway, I've reconciled that. Like that's how I reconcile things with Jesus, by forgetting the church. There's a difference between Christianity and churchianity, and I think really at the end of the day, it's just about your personal relationship with Jesus, and you don't really get that in a church without sacrificing bits of yourself. So I'm kind of anti-church, but
Yeah.
pro Jesus.
I mean, from what you're saying, I'm assuming, do you go to a church or?
No, not anymore.
Yeah.
Even the German Reformed Church, I loved it. Bill was going with me. They seemed accepting of us. It was
Yeah.
nice. And the one day I was having just like a private conversation with the pastor, and I said, sometimes it's hard being gay. And she said, well, God loves the sinner, not the sin. And
Fucking hell. Yeah.
we're back. And
Yeah, no,
I mean, I
time
was
to leave.
the teacher. I was the teacher for the adult Bible study.
Oh my God.
And she
Yeah.
said that, and I'm like, okay, we're done. We're done. Yeah,
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, that's brutal. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Um, but yeah, it's interesting like both hearing you talk now and then also like reading on your website to hear you use terms and phrases that I think like feel really familiar to me, like the one that you just said about like a personal relationship with Jesus that like carries so much meaning behind it for me, and I interpret that in like a very specific way. So I'm like curious what that means to you. And obviously the word God is loaded for like every single person on earth.
uh,
So for me it has very specific connotations. The God I've been reading about through your website and also through like um I don't know, other similar websites and books and traditions seems, even though it's like couched in Christian terms, to feel like very, very different than the Southern Baptist, like angry God that I grew up with that was just like casting people into hell left and right. And feels much more like this sort of like animist force. But I don't know how you personally interpret it, and I'm curious.
well, it's like that. I think the idea of God is just one of them things that's, I don't know, I've kind of like given it up to, it's just kind of unknowable. And I think kind of one of the points of Jesus is to have that intermediary because we can't really fully understand God. And I just think God works through his intermediaries, his, hers, their intermediaries. You know what I mean? I think God is just kind of an unknowable thing. And, one of the awesome things about Christianity is that we have saints and we have Jesus and we have Mary. Like these are things, these are ways that we can relate to. These are folks that we can relate to on a human level, but they have that divine connection that can help manifest things and help. I don't know. I feel like that connection to God is already done. It's already made through those certain people, and they are our way to God. My thoughts and views change constantly. So even on my website, especially
Sure.
older blog posts from like 2007, 2008, my views on God were very different then. They were still like churning and forming, and I didn't know what was right or wrong. So, and that website stopped being updated about 2 or 3 years ago, and it's a frozen snapshot in time. I don't even have access to edit it anymore.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So yeah, you can look back and see some things, and page one might contradict or page three, but that was 15 years of my life in the making of that website. So many things have changed. But yeah, I think I've just come and I feel satisfied right at this moment in life that God is just kind of unknowable. And I'm
Yeah.
okay with that now. I just because I have a better connection with the intermediaries. And we have folk saints too. We have like powwows of long that have died or whatever are kind of like our folk saints here in Pennsylvania. So that's a really common thing too amongst like practitioners of Pennsylvania German folk magic is that we call on our folk saints to assist us.
Yeah. Um, I think I want to come back to that, but before that, can we take a brief aside and can you describe the origins of the name powwow?
There are two, I guess, two theories running around. Um, the first one in the 1800s, there was a man named Peter Saylor, and he was a healer. He was known as a healer. And because the word brauerei or braucher, it just wasn't much used. Do you understand what I mean? We look back now and say,
Yeah,
oh, they were doing brauerei, but at the
sure.
time they weren't saying that. And
Yeah.
So Peter Saylor had a very good reputation, and they said that I don't know if it was every Sunday or every Saturday there would be like horse and buggies and everything lined up at his property for him to do healing for them or to give them home remedies or whatever. And at the time, they were still local native communities. And so he was working with them.
Right. Which
And
were the in would this have been the Harrisburg area? Like
uh,
Susquehannock people? I'm not sure if I'm
so
pronouncing
the
it
big
correctly in their
like
language.
the Algonquin, maybe, because it was more like north, I mean, more eastern Pennsylvania,
I believe that's more like Lenape.
maybe.
Again, I'm not sure if I've
I don't
read
know
the
either. I mean,
names, but yeah,
I don't
don't know
know.
if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
That sounds,
Um,
but yeah, so apparently one of the natives said to Mr. Sailor, "You're a great powwow." And that like P-A-U or something. It was not spelled powwow or pronounced powwow. It was like a
okay,
pow. So he gave this title to him. And uh, English speaking people being who and what we are, I imagine it was something like, did he say powwow? And it just kind of stuck. The other theory is that also around that time, The Long Lost Friend, which had been published since like 1819, 1820,
right.
that had various titles: The Long Hidden Friend, The Long Lost Friend, The Friend in Need. Um, so it was in continuous print and reprint by various publishers. And I guess in the second half of the 1800s, the story goes that one of the publishers here in Harrisburg wanted to reboost its sales and its marketing. And so they thought, well, these rituals and stuff must be sort of connected to Native Americans because they're the only people they knew that were doing like magic. And so they called it powwows or the long lost friend to kind of give it a marketing, and then the name stuck. Um,
Mm,
and then, of course, when German-speaking immigrants came, the United States, being who and what we are, hated everybody that immigrated to this country, including my family from Austria. They hated them because they spoke German. And so these immigrants wanted so badly to be American that they learned English, forgot their own languages. And so words like Brauerei fell off the map and they just started calling it powwow because that was the American word for it. Um, so it kind of has a little tangled history, but yeah, you wouldn't believe all the hate mail I've gotten over the years. Like, how dare you call your tradition power? Like, I didn't name it, and I still use the name because that's the name of it here. That's what it's known as here in Pennsylvania. Like, if we were to say Brauerei to somebody, they would probably not know what we were talking about. But if you say powwow, they'll say, "Oh yeah, that's in my family. My grandmother did it. Whatever."
interesting. Yeah. And so it's not like when I heard powwow and when I stumbled upon that, I immediately associated it with, like, for instance, in Virginia where I grew up on Monacan land, the Monacan Nation has a powwow every year, as do many other indigenous nations in the so-called United States. And yeah, which is, I mean, not at all what this tradition is or this meaning of the word. So that they're not associated, it sounds like, or maybe some.
So the
Yeah.
word powwow as that was not even used by the Native Americans until the early 1900s for their
Oh,
gathering.
yeah.
So
I don't know that history.
the
So
word powwow was being used for our tradition before it was being used. So I just think it's two words that sound and look exactly alike that mean two totally completely different things that developed into totally different timelines.
that makes, yeah,
Powwow
that makes sense.
is based off of powwow. And
Right.
the theory, that's one of the theories, but yeah, so it's just I think it's just one of them weird coincidences or it just is what it is. I mean, I no more named the tradition than, did,
Sure.
but anyway.
Yeah. No, thank you for explaining that. And then I guess, yeah, speaking about like, I don't know, integrity of traditions, you have said in one of your other videos that yeah, to remove the Christianity from powwow, which I mean I've flipped through some of the charms and uh ways of trying, if I believe, or if I'm correct in calling it that.
Yeah,
Like yeah, like the sorts of spells and charms of powwow, and they are very, very Christian, in their language, very much concerned with Jesus and Mary and God and
right.
etc. Um, and yeah, so I had in one of your recent videos, I think you had said something about yeah, to remove those elements would just be to like be very disrespectful to the powwow tradition. And I was wondering if you could talk more about that too, and like how
Well,
Christianity is integrated.
yeah, I mean, our tradition really began, we can trace our the roots of what we're doing now back to medieval Catholicism. And all through Europe, there were like the grimoire traditions, and then there were the cunning men and women in Europe. Um,
It's more of a British thing, right? The cunning traditions.
yes, but they were doing the exact same things, in Germany, in Wales, in Ireland. They were
Okay,
all doing the same things, working with the same grimoires and such.
I
And
see.
especially books like the Romanus book line and Six and Seven Books of Moses, um,
Mm,
Egyptian Secrets of Albertus Magnus. These books were really popular and like pretty much from like the 1600s to now, uh, when the people were migrating from European countries to Pennsylvania, they were bringing those books with them. So Pennsylvania German powwow is really just the Pennsylvania manifestation of European cunning. So we're using the same information, the same material, but it became almost more agricultural based here in Pennsylvania and more concerned with healing. Whereas in Europe, it was that, but there's less space there, especially in Britain. They don't have the land like we have. Their homes are tighter together. They have smaller spaces. And so it was less agriculturally focused and more like finding lost objects, catching criminals, helping people find a love interest. Um, that sort of thing. And, astrological stuff and telling fortunes. But here we didn't need or want a lot of that. So we had a more agricultural focus. But we kept the astrology, like even the Amish and such, they're still using astrological stuff for planting and harvesting.
yes, yeah.
Read the Farmer's Almanac, we still very much have that. We still very much have healing by the moon signs, the zodiac man. And that's very ingrained in Pennsylvania German culture. Um, but it's just seen as what people do. It's not thought
Right.
magic. Uh, but yeah, to change any element of that, which was born out of medieval Christianity, to change any element is like our ancestors were Christian in some way, shape, or form. Uh, there were no neo-pagans coming across the ocean from Europe to Pennsylvania. That was not a thing. It just wasn't a thing. Um, and people like to think otherwise, but I mean, you know, the facts are what they are. Uh, so
Yeah.
this idea is brand new, relatively speaking. I mean, we can thank Gerald Gardner and Margaret Murray for like
Hmm.
really muddying things up, but yeah, and the reason that people came here was for their religious freedom because they were being brutalized. And look at the Mennonites, they were being beheaded by the Catholic Church. They were,
I didn't know that. Yeah, I've been meaning to learn more about the
oh yeah,
persecution of Anabaptists in Switzerland.
awful things. And
Yeah.
so even my great great grandparents, probably all of our great great grandparents fled those conditions because they wanted to be Protestant. They wanted a more simple religion. They
Yeah.
wanted, they just wanted to be left alone. They didn't want all this. And so to take the practices, the stuff they brought with them, and say, that's great, great, great grandpa. Anyway, screw all that. I don't care why you came over here. That's dumb. I'm gonna
Yeah.
take a Zeus and Thor. Like, how disrespectful is that? And then your ancestors are just like, you've done fallen off the line. Because
Yeah.
that struggle, we're here because of that religious struggle. And
Yeah.
yeah, I get very passionate about that. And
No, absolutely. And I think this is really what I like really want to dig into. Because it brings up so much for me too, where like um 2 months ago, or yeah, 2 months ago now, I fled the United States because and I'm now in Catalonia, back in Europe, a few centuries later,
Mhm.
hoping to visit my ancestral homelands at some point. But because of religion and because of religious persecution, that is how I would categorize the current onslaught of hate against trans and queer people in the United States is not just a right wing fascist persecution, but a Christo fascist, a Christian nationalist, religiously driven campaign of hate against trans and queer people, and specifically against trans people.
Absolutely,
And
it's horrifying.
and my mother is one of those people that is pushing that. And my mother, as am I, are direct descendants of these Anabaptists who fled religious persecution. And yeah, here I am fleeing because of our fucking descendant, or our like my ancestors' descendants who are now in political power in the United States and are using their Protestant religion to persecute people who don't fit. And it's so irritating and ironic, and like
Hmm.
I don't know. I just want my ancestors to stop chasing me, and I would like to reconcile with them somehow. I feel a bit hunted by my ancestors in that way. And so it's something that's very fraught for me, where like I want to be able to be a part not only of my living family, but of my past family, of my ancestral family. But there's all of this tension um, of like that presumably they would have felt 300 400 years ago towards their Catholic ancestors,
Right.
um because they had to come from, the Protestants came from the Catholics, and then the Catholics said fuck you, and then they fled and now here we are again, and it's very frustrating. So that's, I think, at this moment in time, my principal difficulty with like approaching a Christian tradition. But as I think we mentioned in the beginning, it's what's in my ancestry on both sides. It's on this side very heavily, and then also coming from Appalachia, um, it's mixed in the Appalachian traditions, which in the English traditions, in the Cunning folk traditions, in um, the Quaker traditions, which aren't folk magic traditions, but just a different sort of Christianity that my father's ancestors practiced and were also persecuted for by the Puritans in Salem. Some of my ancestors, the Southwicks, were exiled from Salem in the 1660s, um, again, because of religion. So, I mean, we've touched on the difference between a personal, for me, that phrase, it just brings up so much because it is so associated with church, the personal relationship with Jesus. But let's say like a divine, an individual experience of the divine is what I would phrase it as. That doesn't bring up the same shit for me. there's such a difference between that and then participating in like structural church religion, which is the cause of most violence and war in the world over the course of history, I think. But um, anyways, that's my bit. Um,
Well, I mean, I'm really sorry that that's your experience, and
yeah, sorry,
that,
it
but
rankles me, but I want to hear your experience too more.
well, I mean, I'd like to talk about yours a little bit because
Sure, yeah,
I can't think of a better way to relate to your ancestors than to go through exactly what they're going. Not exactly. I mean, let's face it, not exactly,
no,
but
I wasn't gonna get fucking beheaded.
no, that no. I mean, things are not doing well here in the United States.
I might have gone to like I might have been incarcerated for being trans eventually.
Possibly, possibly. Um, but no, I mean, it's you can relate to being so persecuted that you literally had to flee the country for your own safety, for your own
Yeah,
right.
I packed everything up in 3 months.
Yeah, and that's how, I mean, how, I don't think your ancestors are, and I don't know, I have no spiritual power to say this, but it would
Sure.
be, I thought that your ancestors have no negativity toward you. It's the living people that you know, humans can always be counted on to repeat mistakes over and over and over again. And
Yeah.
constantly see that here in the United States, constantly. And, especially people of a certain non-color and a certain non-female gender and a certain non-gay LGBTQ. Uh,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? They suck. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, your experience, it's awful. And I mean, to actually have to go as far as you did, uh, I think your ancestors could relate to that really well. Like you had the need to do it and you did it. And that takes a lot more bravery than most people have. Bill and I have talked about it, but I'm like, I don't want to give up my career. You know what I mean? It's just like there's too many excuses that I could make. And so here we stay. But
I mean, it's really difficult and
mhm,
everybody has different situations going on, but I don't know. For me, like I know that most folks fleeing right now are the people that I think that are like that I know personally who have fled or are planning to flee are the people who are like at the forefront of the attacks of the Trump administration, which are immigrants and trans people or
right,
trans immigrants.
right.
Um, but but
Yeah.
yeah, make no mistake, they will also come for gay people more broadly and
Oh,
already are. They're already
absolutely.
gunning for everyone.
And these people that are doing the persecuting, they forget that their great grandparents fled their countries for the same reason
Exactly. Yeah, 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 yeah.
they're doing now. Like they're the ones that are putting their ancestors to shame. I mean, it's what a nightmare. I'm sorry that you had to do that, but I'm also glad for you
Thank you.
because I am glad for you though, because it is not like we were doing so well. Things were going in the right direction till this past decade. What a mess. Um, But anyway, I know we kind of want to keep it focused on like how we reconcile our anger and our disappointment
Yes. Yes.
and I mean my experience would not, you know, I can only talk about it, but yours is such a totally different experience. And
Well, and sorry,
no, go, go, go,
I,
go.
I was just gonna say too, like my grandfather as well, who is the person, my mother's father, um, who was he's passed now as of I don't know 7 years ago. He was a Kaufman, so I'm sure you know some Kaufmans, and
Mhm.
my family they're all Kaufmans and Beilers and Stoltzfuses and Kings and Konigs and uh, Yoders, but he was a Kaufman and he grew up in Bronx, Pennsylvania. Um, and I he never talked about it much. But I think that what happened, or always assumed that what happened was that he was raised Amish, old order Amish, and I assume that during his Rumspringa that he left. I mean, he left at some point, and I assume that it was during his Rumspringa, in his teenage years, and then he went to a southern, I don't know if it was southern, probably not, but he went to a Baptist church, and he raised my mother in that tradition, and she has believed the exact same thing since she was 6 years old, if not younger. And she's 61 or something now. 62. And um yeah, and the Amish community, I think, did their whole shunning thing with my grandfather. And um, because of their religion, like, didn't want my grandfather around. Or again, this is a lot of like filling in the blanks because he didn't talk about it.
Right.
But I know that my mother grew up in Lancaster County and never met her grandfather, who died when she was in her like 40s, I think. Didn't meet her cousins until she was in her like 50s or 60s. I have living great aunts and great uncles who I don't think I've met, but I've seen at funerals that are old order Amish because they don't fucking talk to us.
Right.
Um, and yeah, but then my grandfather went and became such an extremist in the Baptist tradition and raised up an extremist in the Baptist tradition, my mother and her brother, who has a whole podcast dedicated to why transgenderism is ruining America. And he might be right, but not for the reasons that he thinks. Um, and um, um, and I don't know. It's just staggering to me. Like, it's not even that far back in your history. You've seen how damaging being such a, I don't know, like, tight ass about your beliefs and thinking that you know absolute truth, um, leads you to completely abandon and your own blood family. Um, it's uh, it's really sad. It's really quite sad. Um,
We,
it
we
happened to my grandfather. It happened to my mother, and now she's doing it to me.
yeah.
Um, Although she probably doesn't see it that way. I'm the one who chose not to talk to her at this moment, but I know.
Right. Or he's right and you're wrong.
Yeah,
Lost. We had my grandfather was a very no nonsense person, but his father had I'm not sure what it was. I think it was my grandfather's aunt.
okay,
So she married a Catholic. So she
yeah,
was cut off from the family. And they lived in Lancaster County. She married a man by the last name of Cretan, and
okay,
her and her daughter were Brockers in Lancaster area. Now, I don't know that part of the family. I have no connection. I only say it as a matter of interest. I only found out about it about 2 years ago, uh, which I think is just kind of a point of interest in my family. But the takeaway from that is that she was persona non grata because she married a Catholic, and
yeah,
that was like the
yeah.
worst thing that she could have done to the family, and so they cut her off. Um, yeah, I mean,
It's even when it's the same religion, really. I mean, it's still
right, right.
Christianity. It's just denominational differences.
But I
Um,
mean, we all and like we all do that at some point in our lives. We cut people out that are like toxic or whatever.
sure,
But sometimes, that's for self-preservation. That's not really, I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying with this, but I just feel really bad that actually I feel more pissed off that like you had to literally flee the country. And I mean, I see it. I don't blame you. I see it. I see how it is.
sure. Yeah.
but it's terrifying to me that, my son, who's African American,
Yeah,
uh, how long until he starts getting harassed by masked stormtroopers, when he goes down to Dunkin' Donuts or something with his friends? And then
sure.
he doesn't come home and I don't know where he is and he's in alligator Alcatraz. You know what I mean? Just because of his skin
I
color.
do. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the country we live in right now. It's a flipping nightmare. But also kind of getting back to the idea of being, well, not just LGBTQ plus, but also just sexuality in general. Uh,
Hmm.
my son, when he was around 13, I knew like him and his friends were kind of like experimenting. You know what I mean? It's just a kid thing. You go through that at that age because that's when you
Yeah.
think about stuff like that. And he's 15 now, and he's been trying to find a way to incorporate God into his life too. And
Yeah.
we tried taking him to church a few times, but again, it's not for me. So I told him about a week ago, just in the morning, say a little prayer, ask God to help you through your day. And then at night, say a prayer, thanking God for helping you survive the day. And so he's been doing that every day. And he's starting to get more disciplined. Like he's making his bed in the morning. I mean, he's 15, but it's kind of cool. But
I don't make my bed in the morning.
no, you do. I don't do. But he said to me last night, he said, I think it's really working out for me. And it's also helping me overcome lust. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, because I don't want to think about stuff and I want that to go away. And I immediately saw a red flag.
Yeah.
And I said,
That brings
that
up my teenage
that's
years immediately.
yeah, that's part of the human experience. I said, you
Yeah.
shouldn't don't feel ashamed because you're supposed to feel that. You're supposed to
Yeah.
have those feelings. That's how the species survives. You know what I mean? Um, I said, don't be ashamed of that. That's not something you need to pray away. I said, we're humans having a human experience. And if we can touch on divinity a few times in our life, and do some good to help people, then that's good. But we don't need to be denying parts of ourselves. And like I speak from experience when I tell him these things. But I just thought somebody put it in his head somewhere it's still like infiltrating our society that to be attracted to people is bad. To have thoughts like that is bad. And so that Puritan idea is still there. It's so ingrained. And he did not learn that from me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's still there in society. It's still in our collective mindset, maybe, but if that's a thing. But
Yeah. No,
I
I
don't
mean
know.
that is a very complicated subject. Um, that I also think quite a bit about. Just having been raised deeply evangelical. I mean, I certainly
Yeah.
uh tried my best not to lust as a teenager. But now as a I don't know, as an atheist and as a feminist and also as a person who is a sexual being, yeah, there's like all of these different things to integrate in terms of yeah, like existing and as someone who was raised as a man, like learning how to um yeah, like be the safest person that I can sexually and how to approach sexuality in a feminist way in a society like so dominated by the male gaze. And I mean, yeah, all of the different
Mhm.
subjects. But
Right.
I have been thinking about these things, and I'm sure whenever I come to talk about purity culture on this podcast, we will touch on that.
Right.
Um, I there are a couple things. I would say maybe two more subjects that I'd like to touch on. I don't want this to get too long so that people have something achievable to listen to. Um, but those things are if there is like within powwow any kind of practice of like connecting to your ancestors and what that looks like, and if there are ways that you've learned in your life to even I don't know if this is even a possible thing at this stage in my journey, but I'm curious about like bringing yeah, healing to my ancestors or bringing yeah, in a very broad sense, like with powwow being a healing tradition, um, like what can that look like with ancestors as well as people who are alive? And I especially think of that in terms of um, yeah, like the very racist ancestors I have and the settler colonizer. I mean, myself and all of my ancestors until the 16 or 1700s were settler colonists, are settler colonists. And also the women in my family who have certainly like suffered under patriarchy greatly, those sorts of topics, the queer people who weren't able to come out. Um, and then maybe slightly connected. I the past decade have lived in Arizona, close to the border with Mexico, and I like the folk magic tradition there. It's a very Mexican city, Tucson. Is basically curanderismo. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
Um, and I see some similarities between that tradition and powwow. And I had a really beautiful experience with my friend who runs a shop in Tucson called Yulia Botanica that I'll link in the show notes. Um, but she does what are called limpias. I was reading in one of your recent emails about a sort of sweeping tradition with the Bible that seemed really similar. My friend used plants. But yeah, I don't know. After that experience, like I found it really profoundly, um, I don't know, healing in some sort of way that I definitely couldn't obtain from my therapist or my doctor, but that felt equally important.
Right, for sure. For sure.
And like emotionally healing, I guess. And I was like, shit, like I want to learn to do this, but I'm not Mexican. I'm not gonna be a curandera.
Yeah.
And then I found this tradition, and I'm yeah, it really piqued my interest. So I don't know. Yeah, curious if my perception is correct that those traditions share some similarities, and then yeah, to the topic of ancestral healing.
Well, I think insofar as the ancestral healing, I I don't want to say that I quote unquote work with my ancestors, but I'm very much aware of them. And because I learned about my family history and I love what I learned, the good and the bad. And I know why they came here. I know what their struggle was, and I can relate to a religious struggle on some level, not theirs, but on some. Um, and so I think the trick with honoring our ancestors is to just remember them, um, learn about them, and try to do something, try to live our lives in a way that might make them proud of us. I think your situation, you're kind of covering a lot of your ancestors there. The religiously persecuted, the people who are excommunicated from their families, the people who are LGBTQ 1, 2, 3 plus, whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think you're kind of covering all of that. And I think, if your ancestors are watching, there's probably one saying, you know, I'm really proud and I feel really good. And like, even if it seems like it sucks for you right now, I think you're doing the right thing. Uh, but I don't actively although I have to say, and I felt this from the beginning, every time I'm trying for someone, for some reason, it makes me think of my grandparents. They were not Browkers. They were not powwowers in any way, shape, or form. Um, but that's who I think of. That's the vibe of the whole tradition to me. It's that old-timey Pennsylvania vibe.
Yeah.
You're absolutely correct that it's similar to Corandero, even Brujeria, Hoodoo, Appalachian Conjure. because we all at the foundation have the same books that we work with.
I
Um,
was curious about that. I mean, obviously the Bible,
right.
in
So
Catholicism, but
the Bible,
also
the
these
books of
grimoires you were
Moses.
talking about.
Right. So when in Pennsylvania, think of it like Pennsylvania started traveling southward into like Virginia, West Virginia, wherever, and it just kind of blended with their way of life there, which was
Yeah.
different, you know? And
And hoodoo, what is that?
hoodoo is like the Louisiana Black Baptist folk tradition.
Oh, okay.
I know it's been appropriated by white people, which that is very cringy to me, but I'm not hoodoo, so
Sure. Yeah.
it very much belongs to the black slave, like the slave population. It was a way for them to bring their African religion here, when they were tied up and chained on ships and fuse it into the slave owners' Catholicism. And so they created their own, uh, like the saints, they use the saint to represent their African deities or spirits.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, So it's fantastic tradition. I love reading about it and learning about it, but I have no rights to it culturally. So we're all kind of doing the same thing, but it's colored by the culture we're in and the environment, the physical environment, the geographical landscape, the language we speak, the country of origin of our ancestors. You find similarities throughout all of those traditions, which is why when you really take that deep dive into it and find those similarities, you can just like fall in love with the tradition, and it really makes you fall in love with the cultures too. And it just seems so wrong to be like against people from Mexico or Spanish speaking people or black people or whatever, because we're all like the same, just the only difference is our ancestry came from somewhere else. And we have a unique opportunity to learn about that different culture because I think it's fascinating. Unfortunately, that's kind of the minority view and
Unfortunately, yeah.
here in the United States. So, because the United States has always had a problem with others, but anyway, yeah, we could go on and on and on forever and ever. Amen. But that the Olympia, the very first time that water and fire charm we were talking about through email with the Bible sweeping down the body,
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
very first time that was ever done to me, that was in the early 2000s. I felt like I wanted to cry afterward.
Oh,
And the
yeah.
person that did it said she had just learned it. So she was teaching it to me and she did it. And after she was done, she said, "Do you feel anything?" And because at the time she really wanted to see if people actually felt some sort of like energetic change, because for the most part you do not. It happens over time. But I instantly felt like I wanted to cry. And I said, "I don't know if I'm supposed to, but for some reason I feel like I want to cry." And she said that's how she felt when it was done to her. So
Yeah.
I think that it's very similar practice, but it achieves the exact same thing. And it's like an emotional cleanser. It cleanses you on so many levels. So yeah, I mean, we're not so different after all, I guess, right? But
Yeah. And it's interesting, like, I mean, there are similarities, but then I think there's also like, yeah, so much nuance and difference between our different cultures in a way, like as humans, which is, yeah, something that just like opens up so much diversity, and I don't know, maybe like unique gifts that we all have to offer to each other.
yeah,
um and yeah, I'm very curious to learn about what those are in this tradition, in Appalachian conjuring as well. um and but at the moment, this tradition seems to, I don't know, call me more, and also seems like there's more resources available. Like you said, everything's written out,
so,
and which
yeah,
is, I've
yeah.
I've poked through some of the books, and you and your materials are great resources as well. Um, and but um, yeah, just interesting to see the way things blend. I mean, with Appalachian conjuring, like I know that it's a mix of European folk beliefs with yeah, people that were enslaved from Africa, and then also indigenous folks in the Appalachian region, and then yeah,
Scots
with
Irish.
coming in.
The Scots Irish have a big influence in
Oh
Appalachia.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't know that. And then with curanderismo, like yeah, I seems from what I know of it seems to be very much a blend of yeah Catholicism and various indigenous beliefs in that part of the Americas. And yeah, the syncreticisms are interesting. And I think when I first, I've been interested. I think I'll maybe we'll start wrapping up, so we'll be at just around an hour. But just for a bit of a brief summary on what got me interested in this. You gave a bit of your story at the beginning with me. I mean, I left Christianity. I don't know when I grew up in Jerry Falwell's church, um, which the people listening to the podcast know, but the people on your YouTube channel would not. And yeah, I left when I was like 18. Things just stopped making sense. And then it was also a bit of a political thing as well, where the Baptist Christianity of the South, and very specifically the Falwell Christianity, is just very tied up with your political beliefs. And in my city at this point, it's like if you're going to be a Christian, you almost have to like be a MAGA person as well. And so that's just like totally irreconcilable with who I am as a person, and has been for a very long time. Um, but yeah, I left, and then I like as is probably common, like did a very sharp pendulum swing and got interested in witchcraft and the occult, and never really went into Satanism. I don't know, it never really like spoke to me, I guess, but I became very interested in plants and herbalism and still am. Um, Plants are very important to me, and I see herbalism as connected to, or one of the uh, integral parts of folk magic. Um, and but yeah, I don't know. I was still very much looking for this like direct experience of the divine that I saw it in Christianity or churchianity, as we might call it, and never found.
Yeah.
And I just like, yeah, um, I don't know. Everything was kind of chaotic at that time, and um, very emotionally chaotic. And I stepped away from it for a while, and then like did this hard pendulum swing to like pure atheism and no spirituality. And I've been doing that for the past like, I don't know, 6, 7 years, combined with an on and off relationship with Zen Buddhism. And um, I don't know. I think it's maybe a classic path of a post evangelical person. Uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, now I'm like very interested in my ancestors and my ancestral traditions, my ancestral lands, animism, connecting to the earth in general, earth-based spirituality, um, and folk magic. And um, I don't know. I used to be like really fascinated by psychedelics in my early 20s. I don't feel that way anymore. And feel more stable um, emotionally. And um, yeah, and have some room for spirituality and the concept of God in a way that I didn't have before. Um, Although I still hate the church. So I don't know. That's basically where I'm at. Um,
Yeah.
oh, the other thing I was going to say is that I had like once I had recently some more mental space after uh, getting out of the US and being like, wow, now I can explore things that I've been wanting to explore for a while because I'm not just focused on survival and in fight or flight all the time. Um, I was like, I want to explore like pre Christian Germanic paganism and pre Christian English paganism. And then like finding that like we basically don't know shit about like any of that because the church obliterated it, just like the church obliterated a lot of indigenous traditions in the Americas. But also, like, there are these traditions, and there is like, just like there is syncretism in curanderia, in santeria, and like these other traditions in the Americas, there's syncretism in powwow, there's syncretism in Appalachian traditions, even in like certain forms of church Christianity in the South. And yeah, and that's where like pre-Christian stuff has, I don't know, it's just all sort of like melded together, is my current understanding. Um,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, people don't stop being one thing and just completely start being something else.
yeah,
We
yeah,
bring our experiences and beliefs and prejudices and everything along with us. And religion is like that too. It's not just everything comes to a screeching halt. The whole
right.
new order begins now, and it's all different. It's not like that.
No,
Uh, but we shouldn't over romanticize and fantasize the pre-Christian times either, because I don't think they
yeah,
the love and light Mists of Avalon world that people like to pretend they were. And
completely agree with that. And that is something that I have to like, I think because of my fraught relationship with Christianity, like have to remind myself of.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, they're like very much with my own ancestors and then like other existing indigenous cultures. Yeah, it frequently happens that there is like this infantilization or idealization of indigenous religions or pre-Christian religions, and yeah, that
yeah,
isn't very useful either. Um, but yeah, that was I think pretty much what I wanted to like cover and talk about. And for me, I really appreciate the perspective of like I can actually take this experience I'm having now of fleeing my country as a way to connect to my ancestors who fled their country. Um,
yeah.
even though it's my living family who's like supporting um, the conditions that caused me to flee. Um, and that, yeah, I think that is a really good insight. And I thank you for that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I just want to say to anybody watching this on my channel, Violet is with us in Phoenix Line and learning, and she's there as long as her journey needs her to be there. So I'm happy to have you. I'm like really glad we met. I'm really glad you reached
Same,
out.
yeah,
Uh, so far, I think we've been having fun.
I
But
agree.
yeah, so that's all I have to say. And when we stop recording, we can cap it off privately, then talk.
Of
But
course, yeah. And then, yeah, for folks listening on Jerry's Kids, I will link to Rob's blog and YouTube, um, with the caveat that the blog has not been updated in 3 years, I think you said. And yeah, thanks for listening or watching. I don't know how to end these things. We can probably just end it with that, but I'll clip this later. But
all right,
um,
thanks for having me on.
yeah, thank you. Bye.